Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, and I'm so happy that you joined me today. As always, you can go to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information, resources, programs, show suggestions, feedback, anything that's on your mind. I really am so happy that you're here today because this is a show that when I was looking through the show lineup and schedule, and I thought, my goodness, how was this not like the first episode of the entire Solutions with Courtney Anderson show, the audio radio show? How was this not, episode 1? I don't know. But today we're talking about a show that's part of our Joyful Art of Business series. And this, of course, is where we take a big picture, holistic, 360-degree look at our lives. And we ask ourselves in terms of our work, whether it's paid, volunteer, in the home, outside of the home, doesn't matter. How do we feel? What's our return on investment of our time and effort and energy, emotionally, psychologically? Because there's nothing worse, in some instances than feeling guilty that you, quote, should be happy, and why aren't you, right? You have a great job, or your volunteer work is so successful, or your primary work is your family, and your family's doing well, but yet you're miserable. And so we want to prevent that. We want to make sure that is something we are vigilant, we are focused on, and that it doesn't happen, because it's such a disappointment and a poor outcome when we've done all these wonderful things to surpass our goals in terms of either revenue or goals, and yet it didn't bring us any personal, emotional joy or satisfaction or contentment. And so that's what we're doing, because it's not enough to just look at little discrete aspects and say, well, how much money do you make? Or, what kind of things did you accomplish? If you forget about you, right? How do you feel? Is this the right thing for you? So all of that is why we do this series, and it's also, of course, part of one of the foundational, fundamental parts of everything that I do in these shows, in my corporate education programs, and actually all my professional services, as an attorney, as a professor, as a consultant. How do you feel about it? I meet way too many people with, quote, good jobs or, quote, successful, and they are just not happy people. And I'm not saying they need to be jumping up and down, ecstatically, deliriously happy every second of every day, but there's too much of people. Too many people are really mired in misery. I don't just mean like they're having a bad day or having a bad moment, but this isn't the right thing for them. And for all of the things that they have accomplished by other measurements, it hasn't reflected itself in their lives. So what was the point, right? So we're going to avoid that. So, of course, when I said this should have been this specific episode, I would think would have been episode 1. It's because our specific episode today is separate the probable from the possible. That's our topic. One of the reasons I said that it should have been probably episode 1 or 2, at least in the very beginning. I can't believe that it's here so far down in our series. I mean, we're now in over 100 shows, and now we're just getting to this. But this is one of those things that it comes up in every single thing that I've ever done professionally and in my personal life, right? I talk to people, and I'm trying to come up with solutions, right? Trying to help people surpass their goals. And we start getting into discussions, and I start to see people veer off into these ideas of what's possible, right? And I always am trying to bring them back to what's probable. And that creates, for me, some frustration, because I'm often thinking, like, why are we in the realm of what's possible? Because literally, anything's possible. I want to take us back to what's probable. So let me give you some concrete examples of what I'm talking about. Okay. So let's say that I'm practicing law and I'm handling someone's divorce. So obviously this is something that is a painful, sad thing in life, right? So let's say I'm talking to a client I'll take a real life example. So I'm talking to a client a few years ago. I'm handling their divorce. I'm their lawyer. And so they're talking to me, and they're talking. Oh yes, this is a great one. So I'm talking to my client. My client was a woman, and she also happened to have quote a really quote good job. She was I want to say she was a professor at a university, and so this was it's a pretty prestigious job. It required her to have a lot of education. She had, if I remember correctly, she had a doctorate degree. So that's something that in and of itself takes an incredible amount of time and is impressive just because it's something that so few people actually complete, right? Somewhere around 1 to 3% of the population in the U.S. at least possesses either a research terminal degree or a professional doctorate, like a medical doctorate, medical degree, law doctorate. All right, so here we are. So this is somebody who on paper, if I sort of put it down on paper, should be in a pretty good position in life, right? Okay. So she's been married to this gentleman. Obviously, I can't remember exactly what had happened, but things weren't going well. Part of what had gone wrong is that very recently there had been a physical incident or altercation, which is a euphemism for, violent assault. Basically, when I met my client right before this discussion we're talking about, she had been involved in a situation with her husband, and he had physically beaten her, and then she had been either thrown down some stairs or she'd been beaten in a part of the family home where she was in close proximity to the stairs, and she either fell. But in either event, that to me really didn't matter. So she had been beaten by him intentionally, and then they were either close enough to the stairs or he helped send her down the stairs. But in either event, she also, after she was beaten up, went down the stairs in the home. And so she had a broken arm, and she had many lacerations and swelling and all of these things. Okay. So we start talking, and I'm focusing on, hey, we got a lot of things we got to handle. She had, some young children. And basically she starts focusing on this home that they lived in that she loved. It was, her dream home. It was a very fancy, beautiful home. She was very happy when she bought the home. And she started asking me, what I could do to guarantee that she could keep the home. And I said to her nicely, I can't guarantee anything, right? All I can do is do my best work and give you the best information I can, professional service and input, but I can't guarantee anything, Who knows what could happen in your case or what could happen in life? I don't know. So that's impossible. No one can guarantee anything. So in situations like this, so medical doctors, lawyers, people in services like that, we don't make guarantees because it's not possible. I'll guarantee you I'll do my best. I'll give you the best information. I'll be ethical. I'll follow all the rules of my profession, but I can't guarantee you that you're going to live if I'm a medical doctor, or that you're going to, quote, win your case if I'm a lawyer, because that outcome is beyond my control. All right, so the bottom line is she starts talking to me, and basically she gets really obsessed on this idea of maintaining ownership of the family home. I told her that, I'll do everything in my power to make that a priority, and I'll do everything I can to argue for that, but I can't guarantee it, right? And so she basically started to say, well, if you can't guarantee that I'll keep the house, I don't really want to get divorced because I don't want to lose my house. I'd rather, I'd rather stay in my house and maybe get, beat up and have my children live through this violence, but then I'll be in my house, I guess, was her argument. And I kept saying to her, I will do everything I can. It's possible, but I can't guarantee it. So then she started saying, well, something along the lines of, well, maybe it was, maybe her husband, won't do this anymore. He did already say he was sorry. And she started kind of talking about, well, maybe it's possible he'll change, right? That he won't ever, hit me or beat me up again. And then we can all live in the house together. I'll keep the house. And as long as, I guess, he wasn't beating her up, I guess she was willing to continue to be married to him. And she starts talking about what's possible. This is an example. Anything is possible. If you look in the show notes, I do this all the time, right? You'll see me go to the dictionary, and then we start from there, the dictionary definition, because I don't want to try to, come up with some potential solution to something we don't have a clear definition on. And a lot of times we don't. So let's look and see what we've agreed is at least the definition. If something is possible, it means it's possible that it might happen. It's possible that it might exist. It's possible it might be able to be done. It doesn't mean that it does exist. It doesn't mean that it could happen or it will happen or it should happen. It just means it might exist. Anything is possible. Anything could exist. I don't know. So could it possibly happen that her husband would never ever, physically attack her again? Sure, it's possible. Anything's possible. It's possible people can, quote, change, right? That's where she was going with this. It's possible they could, recommit themselves and be deliriously happy in their marriage in her dream home for the rest of her life. I don't know. Let's look and see what's probable. First of all, this wasn't the first time they'd had a physical altercation. So it had happened before. The person had apologized, her husband had apologized before, and it happened again. There are facts of what has happened that will help us be able to make better decisions in real life about what might happen in the future. Now, the past doesn't guarantee the future, right? Correlation, meaning something happened before or things happen at the same time, doesn't necessarily mean that one thing caused the other. Correlation isn't causation. But if something has happened in the past under similar circumstances, that makes me think, even scientifically, that it might happen again. That's what people do as scientists, right? I'm going to come up with an idea. I'm going to test it. If I got the same outcome, I'm going to see, is that just one anomaly, or am I going to get the same outcome over and over again if I put the same ingredients in, right? The same test conditions, the same circumstances. That's the whole point of sort of scientific inquiry and scientific method, right? I'm going to say we're applying this to our real lives. If somebody has physically beat you up in the past, said they were sorry, cried, said they're not going to do it again, and then they've done it again. Maybe they've done it twice. Maybe they've done it 20 times. Maybe they've done it 200 times. It's possible that on the 20th time or the 200th time that they will change and never do it again. It's totally possible. Anything's possible. And what I mean by anything is I mean literally it's possible that we are not human and we're actually in some alternate dimension and maybe we're on another planet, or maybe we're all someone else's dream, or maybe what we perceive as reality is nothing but a fictional, reality series, or maybe it's like the Matrix where we're all, focused on a computer simulation. I don't know. It's all possible. Anything is possible. Anything is possible because possibility just means it could happen, it could exist. It's possible. That's literally the expansion and beyond of what we could even imagine. Anything is possible. Okay? Which is great because that's where we get art and imaginary expressions and we get a lot of our really what seems to be at one point almost magical scientific endeavor that later turns out that something that was possible actually was proven and found to be probable and even factual. So that we need possible because possible is sort of the boundaries of existence. The thing is, we don't even know what those boundaries are, right? Anything's possible. From a spiritual perspective, from a physical perspective, I don't know. If I knew the answer to what was possible in existence, I certainly would be, the most powerful entity, I guess, in the existence, whatever that would be. I don't know. I'm obviously not that. I'm trying to move away from the possible to the probable. If someone, again, has done something, especially if they've done it more than once, that's a clue that it's probable. It's more likely, right? Probable means it's likely to happen or be true, but you're not certain, right? I can't guarantee you that your husband, will hit you again. Maybe he won't, but it's more likely he will because he's done it multiple times under the same type circumstances, right? And he's apologized and said he was sorry. So it's just probable, it's more likely that it'll happen again than it is possible that he'll magically or just of his own volition decide he's going to change his entire life. He can do that. Anyone can change at any time. We talk about that in a lot of our other programs, and I encourage you and I and all of us to examine our lives and see what can we do to change to be whatever it is that we aspire to be or dream of or hope to be, or make different choices so we have different more beneficial outcomes. I believe in that because I've witnessed it, and of course we know it's possible to change. The reality is it's hard. So it's not probable that that's going to happen. That's not the most probable outcome, that someone or something is going to just automatically, completely, change their behavior and their choices, but it's possible. So in that example, practicing law, that was somebody I would beg them to separate the probable from what's most likely from the possible, because yes, he could be the husband of her dreams and never physically assault her again, put her children in danger of violence. It's possible, but it's not probable. When I'm teaching, and I've been teaching university students about 17 years now, right, in all different types of settings. And over all those years, I've had one consistent issue that comes up, right? So we'll get to a certain point in a class, and let's say that the class is on a 100% scale, right? 100 points equals 100%. And let's just say in the United States, traditionally, 90% to 100 is an A, 80% to 89 is a B, 70% to 79 is a C, okay, in terms of the grades. So I'll have a student that will come to me at some point in the class, and they'll have a certain amount of points, right? And there's a certain amount of points that they have at that time, with the total points that have been awarded in the class, they have a very low grade. Maybe they have a C or a D, just 60 to 69% historically, or they have an F, right? But they'll come to me and they'll say, "Oh, well, we have 50% of the class that's still remaining. 50% of the points have not been allocated, right?" And they'll say to me, "If I got 100% of those 50% that were left, right, then I would add my 50% out of the 50, which would be 100% of everything that remains, to my current grade, which is maybe an F or a very high, maybe it's a high F, or D or C, and then my grade at the end will be a B. Will be great." Okay. Is it mathematically possible at some point you can look at a class and say, yes, if I had 100% of every single outstanding task in this class and I add it to my current grade, which is very low, right? Is it possible that I could get a grade that's a B, right, as in boy, which in most places is a good grade, right? Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. Why is it not probable? Well, if someone has a situation where they've finished 50% of the class, I'm just giving these as arbitrary examples. If they, at 50% of half of the class, they have, a C or a D, then is it likely that they're automatically going to change and go from C's and D's and maybe some F's all the way up to 100% sheer perfection of everything? It's very similar to, and if not, a very strong analogy to practicing law. In my first example, might her husband absolutely change, never hit her again, be loving, kind, supportive, nurturing, healthy, all that kind of good stuff? Yeah, it's possible. Is it probable? No. Is it possible that student will now, at 50% way through the class, have everything in their circumstances change and themselves change where they can get to 100%? Is it possible? Yeah. Is it probable? No. Often because, let's say it's something where the student normally is an A student, right? But they're having, challenges with work or in their personal life or illness or something external. Well, if that's happening and it's still happening, then how's it going to magically allow you to go back to some, sort of ideal condition where you can earn 100%? That means you'd have to have a lot of time, very high quality work, time to edit your work, time to ask questions. If you were under pressure that had impacted your grades and led to C, D's, and F's, then how is it going to all of a sudden change? And I've been doing this now, pretty consistently. There've been a couple of years where I was just traveling too much, where I didn't teach at all. But most of the years in the last 17 years, I've done some combination of teaching with my other work. And of course, recently I've been fortunate to teach online and have some wonderful appointment in an MBA program with one of the University of Maryland campuses. So yes, I've been doing this a long time relative to my age, okay? And so what I'm saying is, every time I have a class and a student comes to me with that same argument, well, it's possible that I can get 100% on the points. It is. It totally is. I'm not saying it isn't. What I'm telling you is it's not probable. And usually we have this discussion because there's a certain amount of time a student would have to make a withdrawal from a class, and at a certain point it's going to be too late. And if they continue to go forward with this sort of magical possible belief in the magic of 100%, when either they have external circumstances that have resulted in lower grades, or they have skill deficiencies, Maybe their critical thinking skills or their analytical skills or their math skills or their writing skills aren't where they need to be. So that's not going to change if, in the middle of a semester. And I've seen it happen where I make, in my suggestion, which is to look at the probable outcome, which is that the person will probably do about the same that they've been doing, maybe slightly better, slightly worse. That means you're going to get the same negative outcome. You might fail the class. I've had students ignore this and tell me that I am absolutely wrong and that they see that it's possible to get 100%, and they just go with that. My argument isn't that it's not possible. My argument is it's not probable. You haven't gotten 100% on anything. And like I said, that may be because of external class issues, with work or family or personal life. It may be because of internal issues, skill development. It may be a combination of both. I don't know. But I do know that if that's what's been happening for the last couple of weeks, to think in one day you're going to turn it all around and change everything, and now you're going to have the time and the skills to go get 100%, it's not logical. It's not probable. That's another example. The same thing with my corporate education work. Consulting. So I go to an organization and it's rife with problems, right? There've been, maybe there have been lawsuits, especially in the United States. There may be negative publicity. There may be all kinds of problems. Maybe they're being boycotted, by different groups in the society at large for their product or service. So whatever it is, there's a problem. And I'll go talk to people sometimes, and I'll get another version of this. And they'll say to me, well, it's possible. And they'll go on some sort of, what could happen. Well, sure, anything could happen. I don't know why we're talking about that, though, because we could sit here and talk about anything. It's possible that we could all be teleported to another solar system. It's possible that I'm, just an avatar. Anything's possible. I don't know why, when I'm trying to help get people to solutions, that we go and we sort of move into this it's possible arena, because it's such a waste of time. Yeah, because we could do it forever or beyond even our understanding of time, right? I don't even know what forever means. But whatever that example would be of how much of our conscious resources we could put into it, we could spend every iota of whatever entity, let's call it time, exists, and just talking about what's possible. What that has to do with real life and either solving someone's family law situation, getting them to safety, dealing with your academic performance, dealing with your job performance, it's not, I don't understand why we're doing it. Other than that, I think what happens is this. So people are under stress, right? All these examples are people are under stress. So you're under stress with your family law situation or, domestic violence. You're under stress academically because obviously most students don't want to have a grade on their permanent transcript that's not reflective of them at their best, right? They don't want to have a low grade. And there's consequences to the low grades, right? Somebody might not be able to continue in a program. Someone might not be able to continue to be eligible to receive scholarships or other financial funding or grant money. In a business, I don't want my business to fail, right? I don't want my if I'm a publicly traded company, I don't want my stock to continue to crater and crash and watch, sometimes in real time where my possible imaginary income and wealth is just obliterated. I've seen this all the time with people who are on performance improvement plans. So somebody's at their job. It's similar to the grade and the marriage situation, right? So you're on your job. You've gotten evaluations that were not rated highly from your manager or supervisor. You've been put on a performance improvement plan, which is usually what organizations do, especially in the United States, before they terminate somebody, to show that your performance wasn't what it was supposed to be, and they gave you a chance to turn it around. Usually when I talk to people, I explain to them, by the time you get on that performance improvement plan, you need to be making alternative future goals, because you're not, most likely, it's not probable that you're going to get off that performance improvement plan and get back to being, the highest rated employee in the unit. It may be external. It may be that you're doing the same thing you always did and you're a great team member, but your manager personally has a vendetta against you, and that may be the reason for the, poorly noted ratings, that they could be, inflated negatively. The reality, though, is this: unless you're sitting around, again, people get into this possible thing. So say, yeah, but what if that person who has that vendetta against you, what if they leave? So maybe I'll go over their head to another leader at the organization, or I'll go to HR, and then they'll get rid of them, and then, my evaluations will go up. Okay, is that possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. First of all, the powers that be, right, whoever that you think you'd go to quote, get rid of, or reassign this manager who doesn't like you, who's giving you these false falsely negative performance reviews and performance improvement plans, whoever those people are that you think you're going to go to have them remove that manager from your area is the same person or the same chain of command who put the person in that job. So it's not even logical, right? They put that person there. So you're going to go to the same entity and say, now remove them? What? It's possible. It's not probable. And I think under stress, right, with your job, with your business, with your academic situation, with your legal situation, you just are stressed out and you start thinking, wanting to convince yourself, it's the magical thinking. Well, it's possible. Well, sure. Some extreme examples, when I mentioned magical thinking, of course, I thought about, there was a book out by Joan Didion, which talked about, a year of magical thinking, where the author, who I just mentioned, was chronicling grief. Her longtime spouse had died, and her adult child had died. And so she was talking about, and that's a very good example of where you get into this thing from the possible and the probable. People that are under stress, especially with really intense grieving or tragedy or post-traumatic events, you do sometimes, your mind can take you to places. I know personally this has happened to me, and when I've suffered in really horrible tragedies in my life, and especially with grief, you can go to places where you just start thinking, well, anything's possible, right? Maybe that person, isn't really deceased, or maybe I'll wake up and it'll all be just a big silly dream, and the thing is, it is possible. Like, anything's possible. The challenge, though, if we don't get to the core of what the show is, right, to separate the probable, that's what's most likely to happen, from the possible, right, something that might be able to happen, we can begin to take ourselves to a very unhealthy place. And so in every example I gave, so if you're the person who was trying to see about their options to get a divorce, decides, okay, it's possible that my spouse won't physically assault me or put my children in danger, and I get to stay in my house, so I'll just go back home. And in fact, that's what the person did in real life. That is a dangerous situation. I don't even know, I don't know what happened. That was the end of my professional service with the person. They weren't going forward with a divorce. I hope, I think good thoughts all the time. So I hope it all turned out the magic, awesome, way where everything was safe and wonderful. I don't believe it's probable, and I believe that most likely more bad things happened. For the students, as I mentioned earlier, over all these years at all the fine, wonderful schools I've been honored to teach, who come to me with this magical possible, math of 100%. I've even had students where the math doesn't even support this, right? Where they get to a point where there's only maybe 20% of the points left. Mathematically, it's impossible. It's impossible to earn even, let's say, a 70% is a passing in some classes. In some graduate programs, an 80% is what you need to pass to go to the next class or continue the program. I've had students come to me where the math doesn't support it, where even if they got 100% of everything that was remaining, they'd still have a 60%, which was nowhere near what they needed to, quote, pass. I've had that happen, and they still will then we're not even separating the possible from the probable. Now we're just not even looking at what's possible, because as the math, as we've defined it at that moment, it's not going to happen. It doesn't even mathematically add up, and they'll still argue with me. All right. But you get bad outcomes. I mean, I've seen maybe 2% of students who have said to me over all these years, and the numbers of students are just really, large that I've worked with. I've had maybe, and this is just a rough estimate, 2% maybe that come to me in that situation and say, oh, let's say when the math does support it, and they say, if I got 100% of everything left, okay. And where they are able to, make that happen. So 98% of the time it doesn't. Now, good. I think good thoughts. I tell the students all the time, I'm rooting for you. I'd love for this to be the outcome. Like, I want you to surpass your goals. That's what I said at the beginning of the class. I just can't make you do it. All I can do is evaluate what you do. And so I've seen it happen where it's possible that someone can do this, but it's not probable. And then because they didn't heed my advice to look to their counselor or academic support for help with either seeing if they could withdraw or whatever, they stay in the class and they get the failing grade, and then they're hysterically upset. And I don't understand why, because we already went over this. It's the same thing with the person who came to my law firm. If you went back to the person who I gave you my personal and professional advice is more likely to repeat the same behavior and you got that same bad outcome, it's not my fault. with my clients, with my corporate education and consulting. When I talk to them and I'm talking about, let's talk about what's probable, and they start talking about what's possible, and if they don't heed my advice and they get the probable outcome, then I don't know what else I can do. And when we talk about, and I just mentioned briefly that example with grief and pain, if you don't start to try to reconstruct in your mind, this is at least what I did, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I started trying to ask myself, okay, let's say the person isn't really deceased. Okay, well then where are they? And then I would literally work my way through things that I thought were as factual as they could be, right? So I'd ask myself, okay, well, did someone falsify a death certificate? If so, why? And I'd try to work backwards to try to add up what looks like it's the most probable outcome. Whether I wanted that to be real or not, I had to face it. And I found that actually to be something that kind of helped. People who don't do this sometimes, whether it's in my family law example, academic, your business, your career, when I said people on performance improvement plans and they tell me that they're going to turn it around, quote unquote, or that other person will leave, and that's not what happens because it's not probable, and they don't take my advice, which was really early. You need to start coming up with plan B, like another place you're going to work. You need to get your references in order. You need to ask if, maybe even resign. They don't do these things, and then they have really bad outcomes because they wait until they're fired, which is the worst possible situation you could be in, especially in the United States. I say that due to the social support infrastructure and the challenges of getting another great quote unquote job when you just fired from the last one. So I don't know why people do this, other than I do understand that you're under stress and you just don't want that thing to happen, right? You just don't want to lose that house in a divorce. You don't want to fail that class. You don't want your business to fail. You don't want to be fired. You don't want, when you're facing grief and things like that, you just don't want it to be real. I understand. I really get that. At some point, I'd argue as soon as you can, sit down and make a list. I get what you want. I want things too. I want all kind of things. There's all kind of things I think would be wonderful. I'd love to be a unicorn that lives in a cloud. I mean, I don't know. That would be nice. But assuming the unicorn, well, I'm imagining all this, right? It's possible. So my vision of what that life would be like would be awesome. It would be great, and I get it, but under stress, one of the things that you need to start doing when you're stressed, and we have other programs go into more detail of, you need to start deconstructing and taking pieces of that stress away. And so focusing on all the possible is not helping you because you're not creating a plan in the alternative. You're just sitting around hoping. And it's not going to do anything negative to have a plan in the alternative. Maybe I'm totally incorrect. Maybe it was possible that the person's spouse, never hurt them again physically and was a wonderful, loving spouse. If that happens and you went ahead and still had a plan B, which is I'm going to separate myself from them and move forward with my life independently, then if they turn their behavior and turn out to be the person of your dreams, then what have you lost? Nothing. Academically, if you're right, and you are a stellar student, but it was just too much on your plate at one semester, and maybe you take a withdrawal and take a class the next semester, maybe with the same faculty member, and you will get the super great grades you normally do. What did you lose by withdrawing? Maybe some inconvenience or maybe some additional issues. Nothing. It's the same thing at work. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you won't be fired and you're on performance improvement plan. Okay, but why not adhere to some of my advice and go ahead and see what you can do about setting, at least in the U.S., I work with people in many instances to try to see what they can do to prolong their employment as long as possible, to give them a position from a legal standpoint, see what they can do about a severance package, if they're going to voluntarily resign. I mean, I can work things out if you haven't been fired yet, but if you don't listen to me and you wait till you're fired, and it closes off most of the legal options because the company's already made their decision, and I don't have a lot of room to negotiate. Same thing with your business. I could be wrong, right? Maybe everything that's horrible that's happening in your business will turn around. What's wrong with having these alternative plans that I suggest for what's more probable? And if it doesn't happen, fine. All you did was have that plan there in the background. And the same thing, with grieving. It happens all the time, right? There's Elizabeth Smart, right? A young person in the United States was literally kidnapped from her home. Oh, the worst nightmare, one of our worst nightmares, by just adult criminals who kidnapped her and abused her. But here's the thing, and many times in those situations where those children are abducted, especially by adult criminals, the worst scenario is that the person is dead. But she wasn't dead, and they found and she reunited with her family. We had a J.C. Dugard, another woman who'd been kidnapped by criminals as a young child, and for decades, years and years and years and years and years was assumed dead, right? But she wasn't. So what would it hurt? That's the example where the person's in grief, and everyone, I'm sure, was telling the family members, you have to give up, hope that they're alive. But they really were. And they found them. You always see these stories around the world, right? So what would it have done to hurt you if you were in that situation, not sure if the person was alive or dead? People were telling you they were probably dead. Let's say you went ahead and did what I did, my probable, maybe they're alive or dead. Even if you made a plan B for them being deceased, right? And if they turned out later to be alive, then that's just great. It didn't hurt anything. You didn't do anything negative or bad, and you maybe put yourself in a place where you were a little bit emotionally healthier in the interim. So all that's to say what? We talk about the practice. We talk about the practice of the joyful art of business. It is really just fundamental that you start to work through as you look at your return on your investment emotionally, psychologically. How do you feel, right? That's the gauge. Does your stomach hurt and your head hurt when you think about work, or are you kind of excited and like, ooh, I'm wondering what's going to happen. It's going to be kind of awesome. You need to start working through, separate the probable from the possible. Stop with the possible stuff, because you could sit there again, for infinity on what's possible, and you're not going to get anywhere in terms of tangible outcomes in life, because I don't know, anything's possible. Leave that alone and table it. Let's go work on what's probable, and then start working through solution sets. What happened in the past? What's most likely to happen to people in this situation? What does any data or research tell you? What do professional, credible sources tell you? What are some alternative plans you can come up with for what's probable? Let's take action based on that. And then have that plan, right? Maybe even take that action for the probable. And then if the possible happens, great! Great! That's just extra, toppings of awesome. But I'm begging you, separate the probable, and then let's work on the probable. And let's just table and leave alone for now the possible, because it'll take us down really exciting and interesting theoretical discussions, but it's not going to allow me to do anything to apply solutions in real life. So let's just do that. Again, thank you for being part of the program today. As always, you can go to CourtneyAnderson.com for feedback, information, resources, anything that I can do to be of service. Please let me know. And I'm so grateful that you joined me today for the program. Thanks.